Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and you are listening to the cosmic weather today for January of 2020. So before we get started into a very interesting month, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. So, as always, thanks for supporting our show, and we love to see our subscribers grow. So if you're enjoying the Sixth Sense Society, please take a second to subscribe. It makes us happy, and it's nice to feel that support. And to thank you to all of you in 2019 who have really encouraged us and supported our show. We're really happy to be doing it. We're having a lot of fun with it, and we hope you guys are enjoying it out there as well. If you are enjoying our show and you would like to donate a little bit to help us cover our costs, go to our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, and you'll find a little thing there where you can use your PayPal for a monthly subscription for the price of a cup of coffee a month. It will help us to cover some of our costs and grow our show. So we would really hope you guys will do that. And if you can't afford it, then please join us anyway, because we love having you around. You can comment, and we're always going to respond to your comments, and we love to hear from you. So just a couple of quick announcements first before we get into the cosmic weather. Just to look ahead at the shows that we have coming up in January, we're really excited. Our first show on the 7th will be the very respected occultist Lon Milo Duquette, and he'll be talking about his book and a lot of other subjects, hopefully, that will come up. And he's always a fascinating character to talk to, so we're super excited to have him on. He's going to be joining us from his home in Long Beach by phone. The following week, all the way from Ohio, is Lama Kathy Wesley, and she's a fabulous Buddhist guest that we have on from time to time. And I think we're going to be talking about conflict and some of the ways that we might be able to resolve and deal with conflict. Because, of course, if you're watching what's going on in our world, conflict has been a pretty big part of 2019 and unfortunately promises to be a big part of 2020 as well. So we're going to be looking at some strategies for how to handle personal conflict and maybe some of our broader societal conflicts that we have going on from a Buddhist point of view. And then rounding out the month of January, we have Dr. George Swimmer, Krista's dad, back on. And he's going to be looking and talking about some of the shamanic training that he's had. And that's a fascinating subject. And we were just excited to learn that he's been on Coast to Coast with George Norrie just not so long ago. And we're excited to have him back on as well. So lots of great stuff coming up. Listen to us on YouTube if you guys are listening to us here. If you're on the road and you want to listen to us, just look for Sixth Sense Society as a podcast on Spotify or iTunes or any of your services that you guys use. So with all of that, I'm going to kick it back to Krista, and we're going to take out 2019 with a look at 2020. So go for it, Krista.
I certainly will. Thank you, Michael. Yes, and I'm afraid there may be conflict ahead in January. And you folks that listen to me, I don't dramatize the astrological world too often, but we'll get into it in a few minutes. First, we'll start off with sort of an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I've kept it kind of simple because there's a couple things I want to talk a lot about. So Friday on the 10th, we have a lunar eclipse. And it's our first lunar eclipse of the year. It's going to be at 11:21 a.m. Pacific time in 20 degrees of Cancer, all you Cancerians out there. And we also have that on that day, Uranus is going to station direct at 5:49 p.m. in 2 degrees 39 minutes of Taurus. And we'll talk about that maybe a little too. It's called, that particular lunar full moon is called the cold moon. And then Sunday is going to be the main feature for many astrologers talking about January. In fact, some have been talking about this particular aspect for over 2, sometimes even 5 years. It's that important to them. It's the Pluto, Saturn, and Mercury conjunction in Capricorn. It's going to be at 22 degrees, 45 minutes of Capricorn. And that's Sunday, January 12th. Then Monday, on the 20th, I just wanted to note that the sun will be moving into Aquarius at 6:55 a.m. because I'm going to talk a little bit about the sign of Aquarius. And then on Saturday, we have, oops, I skipped the new moon. Sorry. Friday, we have the 24th, the new moon. It'll be at 1:42 p.m. in the sign of Aquarius. And then Saturday will be the Chinese New Year, which will be the year of the rat, which is my Chinese zodiac sign. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I haven't figured that one out because I think I read somewhere when it's your sign it isn't good. So I'm going to look into that and let you know. I'll get back to you on that one. But anyway, I think it's going to be good. So let's get going on what I'd like to talk to, which is a couple things. I'm going to talk first a little bit about Aquarius and then one aspect of Capricorn. I mentioned a little bit about the sign of Capricorn in our last show, but I started thinking about why is Capricorn called the sea goat? Now, some of you out there may know it. It's also called the goat. Both are correct. And I looked it up, and on a site called godsandmonsters.com, I think I got the real scoop because evidently there are some misnomers about the sea goat story. So evidently there used to be real sea goats in mythology, and it comes from the first sea goat that Kronos created was, I think it's called Pricius. I'm not sure. It's Pricus. I could not figure out how to pronounce it. So anyway, the legend goes that eventually all of Pricius' children, they kept going to land because a sea goat is part goat and part fish. And so the children could kind of crawl up on the shore, and they were drawn to the shore for some reason. And as sea goats, they were very intelligent and they could speak and very honorable creatures, according to mythology. So they kept crawling up, and eventually they turned into four-legged goats. And when they did that, they lost their ability to think and to speak. And of course, their father was mortified to see all of his sea goat children becoming imbeciles, so he did not like that. So because he is connected to Cronus, the god of time, he could reverse time. And that's what he kept doing. He kept going back in time before they became mountain goats or four-legged goats. And every time the sea goats would still go through this journey of being drawn to the shore and then eventually evolving into the four-legged goats until finally Pricius said, okay, I can't do anything about it. They're my children, but they have their own destination. So he was mortified and dismayed, and he did not want to be the only sea goat living and asked Cronus, because he was actually immortal, to let him die instead of live eternally lonely as a lonely sea goat. And so instead of letting him, well, he did sort of let him die. He basically, Cronus placed him in the night sky as the constellation Capricornus. And there he could see his children, even on the highest mountaintops. So I thought that was a kind of sad myth. I feel really bad for the sea goats. Instead, we have the ones that are not supposedly as bright. However, I do like goats, so I'm not going to put them down. So I wanted to add that little mythology because it is interesting to see where the sort of the signs come from, the glyphs and the animals or totems associated with them. And I wanted to talk a little more about Aquarius this time, even though we do have a lot of Capricorn energy in January, very important Capricorn energy. But I wanted to talk about Aquarius because we're going to move into Aquarius and because basically I feel like that the age of Aquarius may or may not be upon us, but we're certainly in the cusp of it. And so some of what I would talk about today has to do with sort of an angle towards what this esoteric evolution of consciousness is with the age of Aquarius. So the first thing I thought I'd talk about, again, is the glyph, a little bit about the sign of Aquarius, taken from a couple points of view and my own point of view. And again, why is Aquarius called the water bearer? Some people, this is an air sign, a fixed air sign, Aquarius, and often people are confused and they think that Aquarius is a water sign because the symbol carries water in an urn and it's connected to water. So I looked up in my first book I looked into, which I enjoy her work. It's Symbols for Women, A Feminist Guide to the Zodiac by Sheila Farrant. She talks about why the Aquarian image is associated with water. Now, this really was very interesting because I hadn't thought about this. She said, quote, "The Aquarian image of flowing water expresses the link between it and our ionosphere, the electromagnetic currents that flow around the Earth and atmosphere, connecting to our brains and sparky bodies." So it's really, it's that water carries the current of Aquarius's energy. And many people associate the sign of Aquarius with kind of a charm or magnetic energy. If someone has Sun as Aquarius, I have Aquarius as the ascendant. And so that's another reason why I'm interested in the Aquarius. And then she associates, for a feminine point of view, she associates Aquarius with Athena, which makes sense. Aquarius, as a sort of an archetype, according to her, and many astrologers would agree with these, is associated with thinkers, writers, inventors, reformers, judges, occupations such as scientists, professors, astronomers, astrologers, inventors, telecommunication experts, that kind of thing. So that was her point of view. And then I did take a look at Stephen Forrest because I mentioned before, I like how he breaks each sign into sort of some archetypes, some of which would be familiar archetypes and others you might not necessarily associate, at least in popular astrology, with the archetypes. So he opens up each of his thoughts about the signs with these archetypes. And for him, Aquarius is the genius, the revolutionary, the truth-sayer, the scientist, and the exile. So we know sometimes what happens when people speak out against the culture, which is what Aquarius is meant to do. And then I was also interested in the glyph. As some of you know, the Aquarian glyph is a pair of parallel wavy lines. And again, this is not to represent water. According to Forrest, it is actually, they represent serpents, which are symbols of knowledge. And the serpent is also associated with the initiates. So that was really interesting too. So what about Aquarius did I want to talk about? So first of all, I think probably most people that have friends that are Aquarius, my father's Aquarius, I have Aquarius rising. I know everyone has friends that are Aquarius, and they certainly can be more individualistic and sort of their own person. And that's one of the main lessons of Aquarius is being your full self and the concept of freedom. Even if, and often it does happen, you have to go against your loved one's desires for you. So this is why sometimes you will even be exiled from your own family, because that is what Aquarius is here to do. And also, I think based on the Kabbalah, Aquarius, the star is on the right-hand path in the system that we use in both the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley's Kabbalistic system. And on that path, one has to be willing to do what you feel is right for you and not worry about people's opinions so much. It is a very individualistic path, which can turn people into narcissists or people that aren't necessarily doing things good for humanity. But the idea with the Aquarian notion is that we have individuals that come to challenge sort of the settled society so that we can move forward in innovative ways. And then on top of it, we are moving into the age of Aquarius, which is a much longer period in our cycles of time. I have yet to determine if it has started or when it's going to start, because there are definitely different opinions. So I will get back to you on that when I have kind of deduced what I think is really what's happening. But right, it's very contradictory. But most people would say we're at least in the cusp. And we can see that with all of the technical innovation. There is no doubt that technology is one of the keys of Aquarius, and that's one of the signs. And the other sign, which is not very comfortable, is the breaking down of tribes. So we're leaving the Piscean age, and Aquarius is not going to be tribal. So we'll have to figure out what that means. And this could cause problems, actually. I think there's definitely a dark side to the Aquarian energy. because again, their Aquarius is innovative and it's individualistic and it wants its freedom. So the tribal ways, and then it's already been falling apart, but I'm not sure yet what's going to take its place yet. If it's going to be sort of like spontaneous tribes or people that maybe form for periods of time to do some kind of work. Even the family unit is really falling apart. And we did mention in Alama Kathy's show that we're concerned about the loss of community. So I think that is actually one of the shadows of the Aquarian age that we're already feeling. And then, Steve Forrest does talk a lot in his description of Aquarius about the water bearer's mortal energy is the tribal instinct. So that's one person that totally I agree with too with that. And what else do I feel about the Aquarius energy? Well, they can definitely be very quirky kind of people and break taboos when it comes to relationship. Sort of the archetype is that Aquarius is better in groups than with intimacy. But because Leo is its opposite, I think if Aquarius is evolved and aware, Aquarian people can have good, intimate lives. I think it's maybe just a little bit difficult in the beginning when the Aquarian person is seeking themselves. But once, you find yourself, it's probably a lot easier to be in any kind of relationship because you're not going to repress it, and they're going to either love you for who you are, and you're not going to try to be someone you're not. But there is, I think, the love of truth, the love of freedom, that electrical energy of the Aquarian personality, and sometimes even their aura is quite true about Aquarius. And as I said, it can seem Aquarius is a fixed sign, so they can also be too stubborn, I guess, and then seem kind of cold until they really get a handle on just allowing themselves to be true to themselves. At least that's my feeling about it. And having, like I said, grown up with a father who was Aquarius, and then my brother David was Aquarius. He was a very lovely, warm-hearted person. So, of course, it also depends on what other aspects you have in your chart. So that's a little bit about Capricorn and Aquarius. So the main event, as many of you out there that follow astrology know, that is coming in is a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. And the last time it was actually conjunct in the sign of Capricorn, because they're conjunct sooner than this, but the last time this happened was actually in around the 1514. And that was during the time where we had Copernicus and also Martin Luther. So that was especially close to Martin Luther's and the Protestant Reformation. So that was kind of interesting. And I wanted to look at sort of the broader timeline of Pluto and Capricorn then, but I didn't quite have a chance to finish my research. But you can see that 16th century was hugely important for both religion and science because of the Reformation and because of Copernicus. And so that's going to play out a little more when we talk a little more about what it means now. And the other reason it's particularly important for the United States is because it is setting up in another couple years. We have the Pluto return in the United States chart, and I'll get the exact date is February 20th, 2022. And so anyway, that to me is hugely significant because this is the first time since the United States formed as the United States that we have our first Pluto return, because it takes around 250 years. And so what I see this Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn being, it's in the second house, which is the house of values and money and possessions, which I've talked about in an earlier cosmic weather this year. And so that's one of the reasons why we're having some of the banking situation, and also we have all the government corruption going on is connected to the Pluto and Capricorn in general, I think. It moved into Capricorn, and I think it was 2008. So anyway, it's probably more significant because of where it's at in the United States chart. So not only is it in the second house approaching, it's not conjunct, and it's not even yet quite close to call it a conjuncture, but it's to me a conversation that Saturn's having with the Pluto before Pluto conjuncts itself. It also squares the Chiron, the United States Chiron in the fourth house in Aries, and it opposes Mercury in the 8th house in Cancer in the United States chart. And so that does put a lot of tension on the underbelly of the United States in terms of a consciousness. So unfortunately, it's going to bring out, I think, some volatile energy of different kinds. I mean, it's been already happening with the second house, with when you think of, the value system really having, we see the corruption of some of the values that are out there that don't reflect what this nation really should be about. And so the most important thing is not to react to the energies, which I already have, I believe, done that several times, because they will be quite intense in this nation, because we are all citizens of the United States, or we're residents of the United States, even if we're not legally citizens. Who's ever in the United States is part of the consciousness of the United States. I don't care who it is, from what country. You are here, you are part of this growing consciousness. And my hope is that we will see this as a chance to remake our deepest values. This will not happen overnight at all. And so I do think that the beginning of January can be, especially that weekend, we have Uranus that will station direct in Taurus. And when a planet stations direct, sometimes there's a little bit more energy there. And that's going to start right before the conjunction. But I don't think we need to be afraid of it. I think that, a country is like a person in that it's a collection of persons, and we're here to grow and evolve. And so one of the things I'm really asking people to do is not to polarize against each other in groups. It's one of the things I learned as an activist that is so detrimental to change, is you can really hate a person's actions and really hate their behavior. But at some point, it's important to see that we're all human beings. And yes, there are a few psychopaths that they're not. We won't name them here yet. But even, I think maybe a bodhisattva could see that person as a human being. But there's a lot of people I know that have had frictions that really should not, because of this polarity of us against the other. I think that really is one of the values that has to change, and then not to communicate in that way anymore with so much diversive talk. And so this is where, if we want the outer world to change politically, we must begin to change the consciousness behind it and the language of our consciousness. And I'm not talking about talking with positive speech. I'm just asking that we think about, is this person really against me, or are we really trying to accomplish some of the same things? And then until since the Pluto's in the second house, until we really look at the values, I don't know how the government would change, because the government is still a reflection of us on some level. Now, the other thing I did want to bring out, though, which isn't really talked about much, at least in the astrology I've seen, is that I believe that, now this is talked about, that planets are beings that have their own growth rate and consciousness. And I feel like this Pluto-Saturn conjunction is a chance for Pluto and Saturn to grow, and especially Pluto. And since when the last time this happened, where Copernicus wrote a short, which was 1514, and I think, it was January 3rd, 1518, when it actually happened, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. So Copernicus wrote between 1508 and 1514, he wrote a short astronomical treatise laying out the basis for his heliocentric system. It wasn't published in his life, but he correctly postulated the order of the known planets, including Earth from the Sun, and estimated their orbital periods relatively correctly. So I see, since Pluto is one of those planets that communicates with the outer cosmos, I see this is going to be a really interesting year for breakthroughs, the beginning of breakthroughs in astronomy, and continuing this, probably through quite a while, because then Pluto will move into Aquarius eventually, where we're going to see even some other unusual things about our place in the universe. And what's interesting is Chiron in Aries is in the fourth house of the United States. The fourth house is about parentage, and it's even debated if it's the mother or father's influence, which I find fascinating. A lot of people think it's the father. So I thought, well, what would that mean for the United States? It would mean we would want to find and search for our true identity, our true origins, but not just as a nation, but as we fit into the universe, which I think is going to be tied into the ability to photograph the exoplanets, which will be coming up in the next couple years. It's going to take a long time to do it, but I really see this as a launching into another scientific revolution that's just going to boggle our minds. And I'm going to hopefully look for some evidence of that. I've seen a little bit, and I just have to do a little bit more searching. But I think it's very exciting, that part of 2020 starting, this Pluto-Saturn conjunction. So we have decided, before we get closer to the end of the show, I wanted to mention that I've really enjoyed doing the cosmic weather. I've enjoyed doing it with different hosts, starting with Kristen. It started out with just a little blurb at the beginning of the Sixth Sense Society. Then we decided to do a separate show so we'd have more time for guests. And then Kristen, her life got really interesting and busy. So we had Olivier Lepage. He came on and he added a lot to the show as well. I've really enjoyed all of that. It's really made me think more about astrology, which I love, and astronomy, which I'm beginning to love even more. And I hope that some of this, doing the cosmic weather, some of my intention is to get you excited about the cosmos, both scientifically and astronomically, and to kind of go ahead and dig into it yourself. When you listen to the experts, people that have been doing astrology for years, certainly consider their expertise. But the other thing that's very important is for you not to just buy into any system of belief, and definitely check them out. You can tell after a while if they're kind of well-rounded human beings, or if they're trying to just kind of get you nervous and scared about the events. I think it's one of my pet peeves is people that overly dramatize every single month, every full moon, every eclipse, because it's really a disservice to you. You're going to be really let down when you didn't make that leap of consciousness, even though you really tried. So I don't want you to be let down. I want you to see the magic of the cosmos, which I see. And I hope, for instance, in my next life, I get to be an astronaut. I would certainly even go out into the stars in this life if I got a chance to do it. So I think that's some of the main points that I wanted to make about this coming January 2020. And in the show that I will be doing, so to finish the thought about the cosmic weather, it has now evolved into sort of another segment, which will include astronomy in some different, astrology in some different ways, and maybe a little bit more magically, though now and then I'll probably be talking a bit about the US chart until we get through the Pluto return. So we've decided to sort of do a different angle to the show, and Michael came up with sort of a great title for it, Spell It Out, and it's going to be a show that is loosely around magic and things I might want to talk about, as well as, he said, if I have a rant I want to make, which he knows I like to rant now and then, and so I'll have my soapbox to do it. But I have really enjoyed doing the cosmic weather, and I really appreciate all of you that have listened to it. So basically, I would say in the early part of January, begin to take, I would say just realize that these energies they are particularly powerful. I will say the lineup of things will bring in, even especially unconsciously, so you might overreact to something. And because it really is affecting the United States chart, possibly other countries' charts too, but I'm not really aware of those. So try to do practices that keep you centered, breathe, realize it's all part of the beautiful cosmos evolving. You're important, we're all important, and try to keep the aggression, be aware of it, because I do think it's going to be, there's some other aspects of it which I did not go over, where Mars is going to cross the ascendant of the US chart at some point too. So it will be a little intense, and I think you all will do great. So thank you again for listening to me and the cosmic weather. I look forward to starting the new show with you next month. And until that time, stay cosmic.